to do a book recommendation, the Jewish Annotated New Testament. It is the NRSV New Testament, but it has commentary by Jewish scholars of either the New Testament, Jewish scholars of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, Jewish scholars who study Second Temple era Judaism when Christianity was formed, and Christian origins, Jewish scholars of Talmudic and rabbinic literature, midrash, legends, and things of that nature. And it's really interesting. It has a lot of articles at the back, but throughout the actual New Testament text, there's commentary at the bottom, sometimes taking up half the page, where whatever is being talked about in the text, if there's corresponding ideas in rabbinic literature, it mentions them. If they correspond, if they contrast, if they seem to diverge from one another, it's all there, and it's really interesting. There's also sidebars and different notes and introductions to each of the books of the New Testament. And so I really enjoyed this. I bought it in 2018. I looked up to see when I bought this from Amazon. I bought it in 2018. It's the second edition. I did not use it for years. I really remember where it sat in this house for several years. There was a pile of books that I had, and then I moved it to another shelf in 2021, and it's been there for most of this time. I haven't used it. I think I initially bought it to donate it to my synagogue, and I used to, 2018 feels like a world ago, but I was getting books for the synagogue library, and I used to be in contact with a rabbi who would, when another rabbi would die, he would go and take care of the estate of their books and distribute those. Or if a synagogue was downsizing, he would distribute those elsewhere. And I also was in contact with a woman who was doing that with her own synagogue. And somewhere along the way, I got the first edition of the Jewish Annotated New Testament, and I was able to give that to my synagogue library. And I'm very proud of that because we have several people who are in interfaith relationships in our area. We live in the Bible Belt, and a lot of the non-Jewish people that they are in relationship with, particularly I've noticed for those who are on like their second marriage, people like in middle age, and it's a kind of different circumstance. Oftentimes it's a very devout Christian that they marry. And so there are questions about things, and I've been able to actually recommend this book, our version at the synagogue library, to people to use to even give to like their Christian spouse who's like goes to Bible study and is very active in their evangelical type church, to say, okay, if you want to see like a Jewish view of these things, here it is. Because a lot of Christians ask these questions, and Jewish people are sometimes like, I don't know. And I've actually found myself, I'm ashamed to say I didn't use this as a resource for a while. In the last couple of years, I've had some questions that I really couldn't get answered. Like a few years ago, there was a Passover Seder in the area, and a British Jewish guy who was not used to Christians having Passover Seders went to it, and he was really interested in it. And those of us who are Jewish, we kind of feel uncomfortable with those things because they kind of tie it overly to Jesus and the Easter story. But he was really into it, and I remember looking at the advertisement, it had a lamb on it, like a slain lamb, and it was talking about the Lamb of God. And I thought, what is that? Like, I know in the New Testament, John says that in the book of John, he says, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And then you have the Lamb who is slain in the book of Revelation. Sounds very like tied to the Hebrew Bible, but that's not something we have in Judaism. And I remember thinking about that at Yom Kippur, like we don't have like a lamb that was slain that we think about. And so I was able to look up and see, well, what's happening? And it does connect. The idea seems to be connected to Passover, even though Passover is not a sin offering in Judaism. That's not the function, but there seemed to be some understanding 2,000 years ago that there was a connection, and it seemed to at least make sense without comment because people seem to know what that meant. And it could also be a connection to other things. That the text mentions Isaiah 53, which I love because you watch these videos on the internet and there will be like all these Christian missionaries who are like, Jews are scared of Isaiah 53. They never read Isaiah 53. And it's like, we read part of the suffering servant passages, which is not just Isaiah 53 in the synagogue. Yes, we don't read that particular chapter. It's not a forbidden chapter. And there's this idea that like we're afraid to interact with it. And it's like, no, I mean, we have people who interact with it. We have no problem saying, okay, here's what Jews believe, here's what Christians believe, here's how we've interpreted these texts similarly, here's how we've interpreted these texts differently, and how maybe even we've changed our interpretations over time. But just being very upfront about that. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy being upfront about where we agree, where we disagree, maybe where we're unsure. And it's not like collecting points on one side. Here's what Christians say, here's what Jews say, and like see which one wins. Whoever has the most points wins. It's not like that. It's having a real discussion. And coming from a mixed Jewish and Christian background, and then making my home as an adult in Judaism, even really before I was an adult, and living in that world, but also almost everyone that I care about in my life has been a non-Jewish person, usually a Christian. Every relationship I've had has been a woman who believed in her heart of hearts that Jesus was God and prayed that way. And so being able to really interact with the kind of commonality that we all have in this rooted tradition 2,000 years ago is really interesting. And so when the third edition comes out this summer, I do plan on buying it. But I really recommend this, the Jewish Annotated New Testament. I'm curious what Christians would think of it. It might, I don't know if the commentary would be too Jewish, like if they would all relate to it or something. I don't know. But I do find it interesting. And I think that it's something that could be used. I really think that, just as I always tell Jewish people that I think every Jewish person should have a copy of either the Hebrew Bible or at least a copy of the Torah, we call it a Chumash, with the commentary that they'll read and refer to, regardless of religious observance. I definitely think most of us should have a copy of this as well, because I think it's good to be able to look up things and to interact with them. There's also a Jewish annotated apocrypha, so that you can look at books that are from Jewish history that did not make it into our canon, but that are part of, say, the Catholic tradition. And so like Maccabees, things like that, where we get the Hanukkah origin story. And you can see these books that were written and compiled by Jews, and at one time were part of the Jewish proto-canon. It didn't make it ultimately, but it could have. And it's part of our literature and our tradition. And I really enjoy interacting with it in that way. And I think it's a really great bonding point for Christians and for Jews. And so this is the Jewish Annotated New Testament. I recommend it for anyone who is interested in the New Testament, believing or non-believing. And it's just a great item to use to explore topics and to refer back to throughout the years. All right, that's it.